we bring you a development that is sending shockwaves through global geopolitics and sparking celebration in unexpected places. Moscow's Venezuela land bridge is gone. A strategic corridor Russia once relied on to project influence, move resources, and bypass pressure has effectively collapsed after the United States shut down what officials describe as all remaining Russian logistical bridges tied to this route. Supporters of the move say it marks a turning point. Critics warn it could reshape global power balances. One thing is certain: this moment matters. For years, Moscow invested heavily in building alternative strategic corridors designed to bypass sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and traditional trade routes controlled by rival powers. The Venezuela-linked land bridge was not just another logistical option. It represented a carefully constructed pathway that allowed Russia to extend its influence far beyond its immediate neighborhood. Through a mix of energy cooperation, transport agreements, and indirect supply chains, this corridor offered Moscow a way to stay economically and politically active in regions where direct access was becoming increasingly restricted. What made this bridge especially significant was its symbolism as much as its function. It demonstrated Russia's ability to adapt under pressure, to find partners willing to challenge Western dominance, and to maintain a presence in the Western Hemisphere despite mounting isolation. For the Kremlin, Venezuela was more than a partner. It was proof that Russia could still shape global routes and rewrite the rules imposed by sanctions. Each shipment, agreement, and logistical success reinforced the narrative that Moscow remained a resilient global actor. The sudden collapse of this corridor, however, exposes how fragile such alternatives truly were. Once the United States and its partners moved to close not only direct channels but also the indirect networks supporting them, the land bridge quickly became unsustainable. Financial restrictions tightened, insurance access disappeared, and transit permissions were revoked. What once appeared to be a stable workaround was revealed as a chain of vulnerabilities, dependent on tolerance rather than permanence. The impact of losing this bridge goes far beyond transportation. It disrupts long-term planning, undermines confidence among partners, and forces Moscow to confront the limits of its reach. Companies tied to these routes now face uncertainty, delays, and rising costs, while political allies are left questioning the reliability of Russian-backed infrastructure. The message is clear. Strategic corridors built in defiance of global pressure can collapse abruptly when that pressure becomes coordinated and relentless. Perhaps most importantly, the shutdown strips Russia of a key narrative tool. The idea that Moscow could always find another route, another partner, another bridge has been deeply ingrained in its foreign policy messaging. With this corridor gone, that message weakens. What remains is a stark reminder that in today's interconnected world, influence depends not only on ambition and resilience, but on access, and access, once lost, is exceptionally difficult to regain. The shutdown of all remaining Russian logistical bridges marks a clear shift in how the United States is exercising power on the global stage. This was not a single sanction or an isolated enforcement action, but the result of a carefully layered strategy designed to close every possible gap Russia had learned to exploit. For years, Moscow relied on the assumption that restrictions would be uneven, that enforcement would vary by region, and that alternative routes could survive in the gray areas of international regulation. That assumption has now been decisively challenged. What distinguishes this move is its level of coordination. Financial authorities, transport regulators, insurance markets, and diplomatic channels moved in sync, ensuring that no individual sector could quietly keep a corridor alive. Shipping access was restricted, payments were frozen or flagged, and transit permissions were reevaluated under stricter standards. Even indirect facilitators found themselves exposed to penalties, making continued cooperation with Russian-linked routes an unacceptable risk. The result was a comprehensive closure rather than a symbolic warning. This approach sends a powerful message to allies and adversaries alike. To partners, it demonstrates that Washington is willing to invest political capital and administrative resources to enforce its policies fully, not just announce them. To rivals, it signals that future workarounds will face faster detection and harsher consequences. The era of partial compliance and selective enforcement is being replaced by a model that prioritizes consistency and reach. The implications extend well beyond Russia. Countries and corporations that previously believed they could operate on the margins are now reassessing their exposure. Banks are tightening compliance, logistics firms are reviewing contracts, and governments are quietly recalculating the cost of aligning with sanctioned networks. This ripple effect magnifies the original action. turning enforcement into a force multiplier that reshapes behavior without direct confrontation. At its core, this moment reflects a broader evolution in U.S. strategy. Power is being applied less through dramatic gestures and more through sustained pressure that leaves little room to maneuver. By shutting down all remaining bridges at once, Washington has demonstrated that access itself can be weaponized. In a global system built on connectivity, the ability to grant or deny passage has become one of the most decisive tools available, and the consequences of losing that access are now impossible to ignore. The global reaction to the shutdown has revealed a striking contrast in how this development is being interpreted across regions. In parts of Europe, particularly among countries that have long felt the pressure of Russian influence, the response has been one of visible relief. Political leaders, commentators, and the public alike see the closure as a long-awaited shift from warnings to action. For them, it represents not escalation, but enforcement, an indication that international rules now carry tangible consequences. In Latin America, reactions have been more complex, but no less telling. While governments have been cautious in their official statements, public sentiment in several countries has leaned toward optimism. Many citizens view the disruption of Russian logistical reach as a potential reduction in foreign leverage that has often come with economic strings attached. The idea that external powers may find it harder to project influence through backdoor routes has resonated strongly with populations wary of becoming geopolitical chess pieces. Across global markets and policy circles, attention has focused less on celebration and more on credibility. Analysts note that reactions are driven by a belief that this time is different, that enforcement is real, sustained, and unlikely to be reversed quietly. This perception alone is shaping behavior. Governments once comfortable hedging between major powers are reassessing their positions, while private sector actors are distancing themselves from any network that could invite scrutiny or penalties. Media coverage has amplified this shift in tone. Instead of framing the move as a temporary pressure tactic, many outlets are presenting it as a structural change in how global power is exercised. That framing matters because it influences public understanding and political expectations. When people believe a policy is durable, they are more likely to support it, adapt to it, and demand accountability from leaders who ignore it. Perhaps most significant is how the reaction has reframed the narrative around global responsibility. For years, critics argued that selective enforcement undermined trust in international systems. The widespread response to this shutdown suggests a renewed belief that coordinated action can still work. Whether in capitals, markets, or ordinary conversations, the prevailing sentiment is that consistency is finally being applied. The spotlight now extends beyond Russia itself. Other states with ambiguous positions are being watched closely, their responses analyzed for signs of alignment or hesitation. In this environment, silence speaks loudly, and neutrality is increasingly difficult to maintain. The reaction is not just to one decision, but to what it signals about the future of global accountability and the shrinking space for operating in between. The immediate economic and logistical repercussions of the land bridge shutdown have begun to ripple across global markets, highlighting the tangible consequences of concentrated enforcement. For companies and industries that relied on this corridor, whether for the movement of raw materials, energy supplies, or manufactured goods, the sudden closure represents more than an inconvenience. It constitutes a direct disruption to operational continuity. Shipping routes must be recalibrated, contracts renegotiated, and timelines adjusted, often at significant financial cost. Insurance premiums tied to alternative routes have spiked, reflecting the heightened risk environment, while banks and financial institutions are reviewing past transactions and compliance procedures to avoid exposure to sanctions enforcement. Energy markets, in particular, have felt the strain. The land bridge facilitated indirect access to petroleum, natural gas, and related commodities, allowing Russia to circumvent bottlenecks in traditional trade pathways. With the corridor now closed, supply chains have tightened, contributing to fluctuations in regional energy pricing and compelling buyers to seek alternative sources. Traders report increased volatility, reflecting both uncertainty and the sudden rebalancing of global energy logistics. For industries dependent on timely delivery of critical materials, the interruption introduces operational risk that cannot be offset simply by adjusting orders. Beyond immediate logistical concerns, the shutdown also affects broader investment and economic confidence. Multinational companies are recalculating exposure, weighing the potential costs of association with sanctioned networks against the benefits of continued engagement. Partnerships once seen as stable are now under scrutiny, and new agreements are delayed as legal and compliance teams evaluate risk. The closure effectively transforms a geopolitical decision into a real-time economic shock, demonstrating how strategic enforcement can directly influence global commerce. Furthermore, the disruption is amplified by the interconnectivity of modern supply chains. Goods often pass through multiple intermediaries, and when one link is severed, delays propagate throughout the network. Ports, freight operators, and logistics firms are forced to reroute shipments, sometimes through longer, more expensive paths. These operational shifts not only raise costs, but also introduce unpredictability, affecting planning cycles and delivery commitments across continents. Analysts emphasize that the economic implications extend beyond Russia and its immediate partners. Markets respond to perception as much as reality, and the demonstration that access can be blocked decisively encourages caution among investors worldwide. The combination of disrupted supply chains, market volatility, and strategic uncertainty illustrates that geopolitical maneuvers of this scale have consequences that resonate far beyond the point of enforcement, influencing global trade patterns, investment decisions, and the calculus of corporate risk management. The shutdown of Russia's land bridge to Venezuela establishes a precedent that is reshaping how global powers and strategic actors approach access and influence. For decades, nations have relied on a combination of diplomacy, economic leverage, and logistical networks to maintain spheres of influence far beyond their borders. Moscow's attempt to circumvent sanctions and maintain operational reach through alternative corridors was a textbook example of such strategy. The abrupt closure of these routes demonstrates, however, that no network, no matter how well established, can be considered invulnerable when enforcement is coordinated and comprehensive. This moment signals to the international community that strategic corridors are no longer just passive tools. They are active instruments of power that can be granted, restricted, or revoked. For allies of the United States and other major powers, the event reinforces the benefits of alignment with enforcement mechanisms that prioritize predictability and consistency. For neutral or non-aligned states, it serves as a stark warning that reliance on indirect routes or partnerships with sanctioned actors carries tangible risks, both politically and economically. The precedent emphasizes that in the modern geopolitical environment, access itself is a form of currency, and losing it can have immediate and long-lasting consequences. Rivals and competitors are reassessing their assumptions in real time. Many nations have relied on the idea that alternative routes or back channels provide insulation from direct confrontation or sanctions. The decisive shutdown challenges that assumption, showing that even distant and complex networks are vulnerable if enforcement is sustained and multi-layered. The broader implication is a recalibration of risk. States and organizations can no longer count on geographic or procedural gaps to protect their strategic interests. Every corridor, agreement, or logistical chain is now subject to scrutiny, increasing the stakes of international cooperation and compliance. Beyond immediate strategy, the precedent also affects perception. Global actors are watching how enforcement translates into results. The speed and comprehensiveness of the shutdown signal that geopolitical influence is contingent not only on ambition, but also on the ability to maintain uninterrupted access. Those observing the event will likely factor it into future calculations, whether in negotiating trade agreements, forming alliances, or projecting power abroad. Finally, this development reinforces the notion that in a world of interconnected economies and networks, structural vulnerabilities are as significant as military or political power. Losing access to a single corridor can cascade into operational, economic, and diplomatic consequences that reshape long-term planning. The precedent set here is likely to influence how states approach infrastructure, logistics, and international partnerships for years to come, emphasizing the fragility of influence when access is challenged by coordinated action. The dust settles. One thing stands clear. Geopolitics is no longer just about armies and borders. It's about bridges, routes, and access. And when those bridges fall, the balance of power shifts with them. The world is watching closely because what happened today may define how global influence is built, or broken, tomorrow. We'll continue to track every development as this story unfolds. Stay with us for in-depth analysis, expert insight, and the latest reactions from around the world. Good night, and stay informed.